One.
Hi, and welcome to Kata's podcast. I'm Katarina,
And I'm Michael.
and today's topic is about how we only have 3 hours in a day.
3 hours in a day.
Mhm.
What could that mean? But if you've noticed, we've swapped positions today. Thought I would.
If you're watching,
Yeah. If you're watching on YouTube, I always forget that most people are listening on the podcast. But if you're watching, I just thought I would see what it felt like to be on this side of the couch.
feels very different, huh?
It's interesting how that just a little position swap can totally change things up.
And how we get used to something so quickly.
Yes, definitely, because we've already done 4 episodes and now we're just changing it up a little bit. Also, for all the listeners, I'm going to do my absolute best to not always say, that is so interesting.
But that is so interesting.
Yeah, why we even say that? I think it's really because we're always trying to challenge each other and bring new topics that we haven't talked about before or new ideas to the table. So that is our brain processing out loud. But I'm going to do my best to maybe not use that phrase quite as much.
And it's my introvert brain processing what I'm going to say. And so I'm filling up the first half of the sentence with, you know what? That's so interesting.
Yeah, but we're going to try and stop doing that. But speaking of new topics, this week's new cadence is from Katarina.
Me. I need my little, I have a little article pulled up that I wanted to reference. So, you know the artist, and I'm going to probably butcher his name, and I do my best to say it the right way. IYY?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Chinese artist?
Yeah, is that the right way to say his name?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So there's an exhibition that just opened at the Design Museum in London, and it opened last week.
Mm-hmm.
And in this exhibition, he recreated Monet's water lily painting with 50,000 Lego pieces.
650,000
Lego
pieces recreating Claude Monet's water lilies.
Yeah, and
painting.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you don't know the painting, it's this massive painting. It's 50 feet wide. So that's why he needed 650,000 Lego pieces to recreate it.
That's amazing. I would love to see that in person.
Yeah, and it's in 22 different colors. And it looks stunning. It's these like vibrant orange, yellow, blue colors. It's really, really, really cool.
Yeah. So is he do you have a picture of it? Like, is he matching the, okay, so is this what the original painting looks like?
So that's
like, is it similar colors? For everybody who's listening out there, I'm looking at a photo of the Lego representation of the painting. And is that the same colors of the painting? The original painting?
If I remember correctly, the actual painting is a little more greenish and blue.
Yeah.
Let me just pull it up right now so we can look at it.
And what I find really awesome is just like, for those listening and watching who don't know, I'm a huge fan of Lego. I actually have one on the shelf sort of right behind me there. And it's really cool to see artists sort of interpret other people's art in a different form. I think that's really cool. Yeah, and we have been to the Claude Monet's garden, like a live show of it, where they're, over the last few years, they've been projecting and doing these sort of like live projections of famous artists, which to me now is just getting a little bit oversaturated, I think, I would say.
Yeah, I enjoyed the first one we went to.
Which was the Vincent van Gogh one.
Yeah.
Back in Calgary. And then we saw Monet's garden here in Berlin, which was also really great. I found it really great. I found the Vincent van Gogh one much better. But I think everyone is just trying to re-infuse these classic artists' art in a new age tech way. And Yeah, I think at first I was excited about, but I'm kind of over it a little bit.
Yeah, and I think it's also interesting. Like, yeah, there's a lot of
Interesting, huh?
very interesting how a lot of these artists are being reimagined in a digital way, but then IYY went in and said, I'm going to reimagine it as well, but I'm going to use a tool that is pop culture relevant, but not new by any means.
And an analog to a degree,
Yeah, and
right? Which is really dope. So do you have the original painting there?
Yeah, so the original painting is way less colorful. It is more black-ish and brown on one side.
Yeah, and it has a lot of those pastel like creams and pinks that I was imagining.
Exactly, and I think that's why I also think it's cool that he redid the he reimagined not only it by the tool that he was using, but also by the colors and how he sees the painting, I think.
Yeah, exactly. The photo that we're looking at, and if you want to Google it for yourself, um, is really cool because it's so like he's using all these thousands of pieces. It really does look like paint on a wall, which is cool. But
yeah, and it gives you like that impressionist vibe, which is the very diffused look to achieve that with blocks,
which is really cool. I find, I would love to see that. I hope it exhibits here in Berlin at some point. But
yeah, so if any one of you is in London anytime soon, it's the IYY Making Sense exhibition. It's at the Design Museum in London from April 7th to July 30th.
Cool. And let's hope you have more than 3 hours left in your day to be able to do that. But let's move on to the topic. So 3 hours left in a day. Have you heard of this before? Kat?
Yeah, I mean,
I'm wondering if the audience has heard of this before. I'm sure they have because it's actually a very common topic that has been talked about previously, even before us. Yeah, and it's nothing new, but we just felt like we wanted to talk about it. And I guess all of our other topics we explained why we came up with something, and this one was the same thing. We were just sitting down in the evening at the end of our day after running all of our errands, and we were just saying, man, there's not a lot of time left in the day to just do stuff for yourself.
Yeah, and I think the number, if you've heard of it, maybe the number was different. I think there's a lot of this topic is really out there and relevant, and maybe some people say, oh, it's only 4 hours in a day or whatever, but the 3 hours in a day, I think we sort of did the math for ourselves, and that this is what we sort of came up with.
Yeah, I think it's common. I think people are using 3 hours a lot, actually. I think originally we had said 5 or 4, but it is. So if you think about it, let's break that down for everyone listening or watching here. So generally, in the past, and for most people, they're going to work 8 hours.
Yeah.
And then they're going to sleep for 8 hours.
So that's 16 out of 24 hours.
Yep, which leaves you 8 hours remaining. So in an ideal, perfect situation, 8 hours of work, 8 hours of sleep, which we talked about before, why that's important. That leaves you 8 hours left of a 24-hour day. Now, that doesn't even account for the time to get to and from work and getting ready. So they're saying that's somewhere between an hour and an hour and a half to commute there and back.
So let's go worst case scenario. You have then 6.5 hours left.
Yep. And then you usually have to cook and eat your dinner.
And have a lunch break too, maybe, if that's not accounted for in the 8 hours of work.
Yep. So a lunch break. So let's say half an hour lunch. Now you have 6 hours left. And then an hour and a half to cook and eat dinner and then to clean up after that. So now you're down to 4.5 hours. And then you have to maybe run some errands. Like if you can't just cook if you don't have groceries, or you have to go pick up the mail, or maybe if you have children, you have to pick up the children, or you need to run to Shopper to buy medicine or whatever that might be, pick up a package. 4.5, running errands, maybe another hour. Now you're down to 3.5. And then you have to brush your teeth, pack your bag for the next day, prep stuff for the next day. That's about maybe another half an hour or so. And then boom, you're down to about 3 hours.
Yeah, so that's really only 3 hours that are outside of the things you sort of have to do in a day that you can fill with whatever you want to fill them with.
Yes, stuff that isn't related to picking up your children, doing laundry, cleaning the house, brushing your teeth, having a shower, doing laundry, errands, groceries, cooking, cleaning. Like, man, there is a lot of crap that you have to do in life outside of the 8 hours of sleep, 8 hours to work. And then you're left with three to just do whatever the heck you want.
Yeah, and I also think those even the way that we sort of put this regular, like this common day together, that's being very efficient. So maybe you're like
Yeah.
dilly dallying here and there, like I don't know, it takes you longer to get up, like maybe you work longer a day or you're just wasting time.
Yeah,
That those
think about that. Imagine you're someone who works more than 8 hours because their job is strenuous. You have to work 10 hours. Then suddenly you're down to 1 hour left. Think about that, right?
And we're not even talking about people that do shift work, 12-hour days. Like we like this is just the we're making the assumption that it's like an average 8-hour day. And even then you only have three
Right.
hours.
But when you talk about shift work and doing a 12-hour, usually they have multiple days and off. And I think we're going to get to that towards the end. But we're just talking about the average sort of normal traditional day. But let's get into it. You have 3 hours left. What do most people do with that? Like, what are the traditional things that you have that people do for pure enjoyment, right? Like for themselves. I would say that a lot of people will fill their time after work, maybe going to the gym. And for a lot of people, that is a stress relief, for sure. It's an enjoyment.
Or they, if it's not the gym, then it's maybe sports. Like maybe they're part of a sports team.
Yep. Or yoga.
Yep.
Or like a social club for sports. And all these things can be filled with whether you choose to do them out of pure enjoyment or because you kind of have to. Some people, don't want to work out, but they feel like they have to. Some people don't want to do yoga, but they need to work on their flexibility because their physio told them to, or sports. Some kids are forced into playing sports, or young adults, I guess, because kids have more time in a day.
Speaking of kids, I think a lot of parents would choose to spend some time with their kids, playing with them, talking to them after they haven't seen them in like the whole day
Yeah.
when they went to school or something.
Yeah, and that is a whole other ballgame because with kids, it can be a part of the stressful day, and then suddenly the parents spend an hour playing with their kids, and then the parents only have 2 hours left to themselves, if that, right? So in some cases, it's a part of that leisure 3 hours that they spend, but in a lot of cases, it's even takes away from it, right? Like, what if a parent is just so tired?
Well, that's actually really true because
Like, if a parent is playing video games with their kids, maybe that's good, right?
yeah, and even then, I think the parent, even if they are enjoying it, I think the parent still feels like they need some time for just themselves. So that even gets less and less.
I think that's what I was saying. That's what I was trying to get at, is that playing with your kids, yes, it's a part of that free time, that part of the 3 hours, but it's not free time for just yourself. But speaking of video games, a lot of people like to spend their time playing video games.
Yeah, or speaking of digital things to do, watching shows, movies, Netflix, those sorts
I
of
think that's the
things.
most common. I think between someone hitting up the gym for personal time and binging Netflix, the whole Netflix and chill,
Yeah, you know?
the that is like very common. I think binging shows is very, very, very common.
And I think another one is being social with people, going out for drinks.
Right. Outside of working out, binging television shows, the other big one is just free time to see your friends, socialize, go for drinks.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of people, like in North America and here too, after work, they usually spend an hour or two doing the after work drinks, like the happy hour or whatever. And in Germany, they call it,
Feierabendbier.
yeah, so they go for drinks. And for a lot of people, that is their free time and it's a way to rejuvenate. For someone maybe who's more introvert, as we talked about in some of our previous episodes, for you, that's even more tiring. So that even digs into your 3 hours of personal time.
That's really true. Like I might enjoy hanging out with friends, but I still feel if I filled my whole 3 hours with that, I think I would be like, oh God, where do I get the time to replenish my batteries
You have
now?
none.
Yeah.
Your whole 24 hours is gone. It's like 8 hours of sleep, 8 hours to work, your errands, groceries. Then you have to meet up with a friend. You socialize all night, and then you go home, and then you're into the packing, getting ready, showering, and then you have to go straight to bed. Like your day is gone. If you're not a person who is like recharged by that, but for you, you would need like an hour or two to like read, for example.
Yeah.
That's your thing.
Yeah, to read, or I think there's a lot of activities that we haven't mentioned yet that people like. One thing could be reading. I think some people might enjoy painting, drawing,
Yeah.
like creating art, like
Anything that people can do in their free time. Going for a run, like running, is such a huge way for people to spend their time, because you can do a nice run in like an hour and a half, 2 hours. Go for a bike ride or whatever.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But when you were young, was playing video games with your parents, because we talked about that, was that a thing? Was that a part of your generation with your parents or your mom or your dad?
Never with my parents. Never. Never. I played a lot of video games
Yeah.
as a child
Yeah.
too. Like on the not video. Okay. I'm being an amateur here. Is it also a video game if it's on a computer, or is a video game just like a?
Yeah, of course. A video game is a computer. Okay, we just watched the movie Tetris recently, which was a phenomenal film.
Yes.
And it started out on PC.
And that just reminded me, we have to see if we can find my old Game Boy Color at home.
For sure. That's one thing we definitely need. But what video game on PC did you play?
So the first one I ever played, my uncle got it for us. It was on the PC, I think, that he gave us as a gift or something. It was called SimCity. Do you know SimCity?
Yeah, of course. Everybody knows SimCity. SimCity was such a fun game because for me, I wanted to make the perfect neighborhood, like perfectly aligned, really beautiful. Everything, like the nuclear plant was far away from the city. Everything was, and because I lived in Calgary, and if you're not familiar with Calgary, Calgary is based off of a grid system. So I built it in a way that was very grid-like. And what about you? Was yours just all over the place?
Probably a bit more all over the place than you. I tried to make it very green, so I always try to use all the wind power. But that wouldn't provide you with as much power. And then sometimes if I got bored of my my city, I made like couldn't you make a natural disaster happen?
Oh yeah. Just to destroy it. One game that I absolutely love that killed a lot of time was Sim Park. I think that's called, where you could build an amusement park and you could design a roller coaster.
No, that's Roller Coaster Tycoon.
Okay.
I played that. That was the game I was going to say next, and it was also and you remember all the little people puking?
Yeah, but I think SimCity had a variation of the same thing, or maybe they were the part of the same franchise. I don't know, but that's pretty funny. I remember for us, my parents, the very first video game that we ever purchased was the original Nintendo Entertainment System, the NES.
That says nothing to me.
The Nintendo.
I know, yes, but okay, so it sounded like it was a collection of games.
No, the original gray box was called Nintendo Entertainment System.
Okay.
And people called it the NES. And the very first game we had was Mario Brothers and Duck Hunter, the very original. And how we even got onto this was we were, in the last episode, I talked about how we did a lot of road trips. And one of the road trips, we went down the coast of California, and we met up with some of my parents' friends who, when they came over on the boat, they ended up in California somehow. So we met up with them. And I honestly don't remember much about the family, but I just do remember that they were a little more well off. So we got to their house, we're like, whoa. And they pull out this thing, they're like, have you ever seen this thing? it's thing, and there's little pads, and you play, and it's called duck hunt, and you can hunt these little flying ducks, and we were fascinated with it. And I remember I loved playing it. I was obsessed with it. And when we got back to Canada, I remember one day I came home from school, and my dad had bought it. Like he went to the, pardon me, video game store, and he bought it, which is so, thinking back, it was so cool of him because, again, like my dad didn't make a lot of money at the time back in the day, but he bought this game because it just brought so much joy, and it brought our family together. And so at the end of a work day, my dad would always play it with us while my mom was cooking, or vice versa. Because that's the thing, right? Like if you need more time in the day, you need someone else to do part of the work. Like if you only have 3 hours in a day, you can gain an extra hour or two if someone else is cooking or doing the laundry.
Yes, definitely. When you're sharing those, when you're dividing the tasks, if you're doing them both together,
Yeah.
then I think there's more. A chore can become an enjoyment.
Yeah.
So maybe that feeds into your 3 hours because you're spending it with your partner,
Yeah.
or you divide it up and then each individual
gets a little more time depending on the day, because both people have to sleep 8 hours, then work 8 hours. But like, yeah, when my mom would cook or do a bit of laundry, my dad could hang out with us, and then vice versa. If he would go get groceries and she wouldn't go with him, she would have more time to herself. That's how you make that up. And I think that is like how you're able to create more time for each other, not every day, but like every other day or a few days in a row. And I think as a single person, you really only get the 2 to 3 hours to yourself. When you have a partnership, then you start to gain a bit of time here and there. Like, as long as both people are pulling their weight to a degree. But just so that the pod isn't so serious today, we thought we would also throw in our favorite binge shows.
Favorite binge shows.
Like, what has been your go-to favorite binge show that you can watch over and over again?
Over and over again. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is Friends.
I was gonna say you were gonna say Friends.
Yeah. Um, I also could watch. I think there's two shows that I could watch over and over again. It's so like basic white girl, like Sex and the City and Friends. I don't know my two binge shows, and they're not new. But I am a person I'm a very nostalgic person. I love rewatching things, and I love older stuff from
Right.
the 90s or early 2000s. So I don't think I will ever love a show. No, that's not true. Yeah, they just have a very special place in my heart.
Okay, so what is a show that is a little more recent that you started watching, or that we started watching, and then you were just like, if you had all the time in the world, you would just watch like till the end?
Well, the end of the last year, Michael was so kind to finally introduce me to Stranger Things.
Yeah, because honestly, Kat must really just love watching Friends or Sex and the City over and over again, because she hasn't watched so many sort of epic series, and there's just a lot of series that you haven't watched. But you're about to say Stranger Things is one that you could have just binged the seasons 1, 2, 2, and 3 back to back.
Totally, yeah.
If we didn't value needing our 8 hours of sleep or whatever. Because for me, I used to binge shows all the time.
So tell me, okay, so what is binging for you? At what amount of episodes does binging start?
For me, binging starts at 4+.
Okay.
I think watching 1 episode, 2 episodes, 3 episodes is not a binge to me because of that 3 hour rule. Let's say an episode's about 45 minutes each. It kind of falls into that 3 hours, and then you can kind of then get ready for bed or whatever. But when you start watching 4+ episodes, it cuts into your time somewhere. So either you're not going to have enough time to do your laundry or go get groceries or sleep 8 hours. Like there was a point in time, and I'll get into my shows, but for a point in time when Netflix was producing the Marvel TV shows. They did a really great job, and it was a big deal. And I remember very clearly, I believe it was Daredevil. And it was a great show with really great writing and really great action. That's one show. But also, back in the day, I hadn't watched Breaking Bad yet. And when it landed on Netflix, people had already loved it from HBO. And at the time, I didn't have HBO. So I'm like, here's my chance. And I watched it. And Katarina hasn't watched it yet either. But it is such an epic television show. The writing is so good. And I remember I couldn't stop watching it. So it was like 6 episodes, 7 episodes, 8 episodes. And if you're doing that, that's 7 to 8 hours. So where do you make up those 5 hours? It's usually with sleep, or you don't do a bunch of house errands.
I think that's actually really true. It's we sacrifice sleep a lot for some of these activities. Like it could be binging, it could be also working out. Some people get up extra early because they want to squeeze that in, or staying late, staying out with friends late, and all those sorts of things.
Yeah, and it's because, like you said, like time in a day is finite, right? So if someone, let's say they work 8 hours and then they have all their chores or whatnot, and then they go out with their friends, right? Let's say they go to have drinks or dinner with their friends and they're out for 4 to 5 hours, but they also want to work out still. And they need an hour to work out. So suddenly they have to pull that time away from somewhere else.
And it's mainly sleeping that we sacrifice.
And most people will generally say take it from sleep, because to them that's just easy. It's an easy place to steal from, right? You're stealing time. Because for them, they still have to do laundry because they need clothes to wear. They still need to brush their teeth, have a shower. They need to still go get groceries. They still need to cook and eat if they're hardcore into working out. So where do you steal time from? And time always gets stolen from sleep the most, in my opinion.
Oh yeah, I agree. And I actually have a story about that.
What is your story then? Oh, your personal story. Yeah. I think I know this story. I think this is a good one.
And I think I'll get into what I think is really goes beyond what we already talk about. I'll get into that later. But okay, so the story is sacrificing sleep for an activity, and that bleeding into the following day, because I think I was in university and I was out with a friend in a different city.
Okay, what city was it?
Dortmund, and it was a Friday night, and I used to work in retail on Saturdays, and I had a shift from 10 to 7 the following day, I think. And I had said, yeah, no problem. I'll come to Dortmund on Friday. I'll take the train. We'll go party, and then I don't know what my plan was. I think the plan was to take the last train back to my city, but I had such a great time that I ended up taking the first train back to my city.
Like in the morning?
In the morning.
The following day?
The following day, I think 5 a.m. And then I walked home from the train station, and I said, okay, so I think I got home at 7, and I said, I'll just lay down for 2 seconds to chill, because I think I put the TV on or something. It's too early to get ready for work. If my shift started at 10, I had to be there by 9:30, leave at 9. So I had about 2 hours. And then at some point...
You hadn't slept yet?
No, I hadn't slept yet.
Okay.
And then I fell asleep, and I
of course
woke up at 9:45, so already 15 minutes late, realized my roommate at the time was in the bathroom showering. So what did I do? I called work. I got up. I said, I'll be there in 15 minutes. I got up. I put on my clothes. I was still wearing the makeup from the night before. I wasn't able to brush my teeth, and I rushed to work, to then work in retail for 9 hours. So I sacrificed my entire sleep, and a lot of people do that. I sacrificed my entire sleep for the enjoyment. So instead of doing 3 hours, I made it like 10 hours.
Yeah, but you didn't even brush your teeth.
And
you just chewed gum or mint or something?
Yeah, probably. And I was so hungover, and it was like a women's underwear store that I worked at. So it was really like I felt like I was gonna puke into the boxes, and it was
Oh
terrible.
God.
Like I would never do that again, but it was.
It's funny because I have a similar story, and if we're exchanging stories, we might as well tell this one. I was working for a restaurant, and because that's what I was doing a lot, like in hospitality. And at the time in the city, the rave culture was starting to hit like pretty big. And so the raves were always on Saturdays, and I just couldn't get out of my shift on the Sunday. And one of the reasons was I was working at a restaurant that had two levels. They had a main level on the bottom, and then more of a sports bar level upstairs. It was more of a bar, like a lounge, but it was more sports bar, and it was really busy on happy hour times and Fridays and Saturdays, like kind of in the evenings. And Sundays was kind of hit and miss. So I was like, they only ever had one person working, right? So I couldn't get out of it. Like I had to work it. I had to basically bartend and serve the entire space. So I went to this rave. Long story short, same thing. My plan was to go to the rave at 11, which is pretty early for rave standards, and then leave at like 4 a.m. Get enough sleep to start my shift for 9. So I would sleep like 4 hours. But again, loved partying too much. So left at like 6:30, went home and laid in bed until 8, so hour and a half, and went to work the next in the morning at 9. The funny thing about it is it wasn't that busy. So I had all the TVs on, and um around the corner was like a little sitting area. Around, like when you first walked in, you could see the bar and there was some tables that you could sit, but around the behind the bar there was like a little quieter sitting area that no one ever really sat at. And I always went behind there and sat and napped and like literally sat and like had mini like 10-minute naps.
Oh my god.
Yeah. And I always, like when people walked in, you could kind of hear like there was like a little like trigger because it was like a big place. There was always like one person working, and I would just like pour a drink or serve their food, and I would go back and sit behind and just like have these mini naps. And I just remember so clearly how horrible it was because I was falling asleep standing up, and I was just so tired, and I was just so partied out. But I think it's a rite of passage for every young person to do that. I don't think anyone's not ever done that, really.
And I think it's also when you're young, you don't think the way that we think right now. Like we aren't aware. I think you have less chores and less things to do, so
Yeah.
you probably have more than those 3 hours, and you make them even longer by staying up through the night.
Yeah, I think when you are a young person, and yes, you have to work to pay rent, and you may have to work 8 hours, but just sometimes your overall responsibilities are less. So it's easier to blur responsibilities into free time. You know what I mean? Because I think as you get a little bit older and you start to have more concrete responsibilities, things are very defined. The lines are very defined with this is sleep time, this is work time, these are the times to do all these certain types of chores, and then you only have 3 hours, which is such a shitty way to think about life.
So let me ask you a question. Would you like more than 3 hours in a day? Speaking Monday to Friday, of course, ignoring weekends because we most of the time get to do what we want.
I think that I would like to have a little more than 3 hours because, interestingly enough, because I enjoy films and cinema so much, watching shows have become a part of like not like a free time thing for me, but it's become a part of like my routine, such as working out or doing a chore that I want to have maybe just one extra hour to do sort of nothing, like just to read or to whatever to myself. So that's how I feel.
Do you believe there is such thing as too much time? in a day for yourself?
Maybe. Do you?
I think it's a hard one. My instinct was to say no, but then when I really think about it, I think there is something like too much free time in a day. And the person that I am, I obviously read a lot about this online, and I found this research that this woman from California has done. She's a psychologist and a behavioral scientist.
Yeah, from UCLA. You were telling me
From
about that.
UCLA, exactly. And she did some research trying to figure out what the average time is that that Americans have on a day-to-day basis, and it's the 3 hours. And she has actually found that the sweet spot lies between 3 to 5 hours of free time in a day, because if it's less than 3 hours, you feel constantly overwhelmed, which we can understand. And she also said that if you have more than 5 hours, it you suddenly feel a lack of purpose, because you have so much time that you sometimes, I think, fill it with things that are more in the vein of wasting time. So I don't know. How do you feel about that?
Yeah. Well, okay. So let's go back to a few years ago. I think a lot of people just had a lot of free time, right? Whether by choice or whatever that might be. And so in 2020, middle 2020 to middle 2021, I would say a lot of people had more than 3 hours in a day to themselves. And I was speaking to some friends who just felt like they were wasting away because they didn't have that lack of purpose. Because I think people feel they feel like they need to accomplish something. And whatever that thing might be, whether it's to build a house or to finish their work or to paint or to do a chore, like you need to be able to feel this sense of completing an accomplishment. And when you have too much time, I think psychologically what happens, and I'm obviously nowhere near educated enough to be speaking about this, but this is how my brain is processing it. I feel like when you have too much time, you think that you will have enough time to get it done, and then eventually you still just don't get it done.
It's that whole idea.
It's procrastination.
Yeah, it's that whole idea of we all are so aware that we only have one life and X amount of years in this life. So we try to make the most of it because we know it's limited. And if we were living, if we knew we'd be living forever and would never die, would we use our time as wisely as we do since we know that we have a limited time on Earth?
Yeah, exactly. And so on a daily basis, for me, that's why I was saying an extra hour could be nice.
Totally, I get what you're saying. And I think it's also interesting, she was saying that it's not only the time that is sort of like a delicate thing to look at. She said it's also the way you spend your time. So there's these activities that you can do, like let's say scroll TikTok for an hour and a half. You might enjoy it in the moment, but sometimes you leave your phone and you have that icky feeling of like, what did I spend my time actually doing?
Exactly. And if you have too much time, you're constantly doing that rather than being like, holy crap, I only have like 2 hours left to myself. I might as well do something that I've been wanting to do or go work out or whatever. You're not wasting your time, because let's be honest, scrolling social media is just wasting time.
Yeah, and it's the opposite of those activities are the ones that you often don't want to do, but you know are good for you. So it's like working out, journaling, meditating, going for a walk, which often you aren't, especially when you're not in a routine, you aren't excited to start doing that. But no one has ever said that they regret it.
You love it after. For some reason, you just feel so good after. It's funny, like even I remember back we would do a lot of social clubs and play social sports, and that was one of the things we in Calgary in the winter. There's a lot of social clubs because it's cold, and so you go to these gyms and play social. And I just dreaded going to it because the whole having to have my entire day and then committing to going to this thing. But every time we went, it was just so great because you would go play for the hour, then you would all have maybe a drink after for an hour, and then you go home and you have an hour to yourself to just unwind, maybe watch a show. And those types of activities and things to fill your day are so worth it, rather than having 6 hours all to yourself and then you get lethargic, I think.
I totally know what you're saying. Like back in Calgary, I used to be part of a book club. And as an introvert, sometimes going to these things, and I didn't know the people that well. So I was always like, oh, okay, tonight is book club. And then it was almost like before I was dreading it. While I was there, I was liking it, and after I had left, I loved that I went. And it's interesting. And that sounds like your story too.
Yeah, but isn't it like, and I have to use this word, but isn't it kind of interesting that how if you have too much time, you sometimes start to get lethargic, and it can do that for you because again, there's no sort of sense of purpose there. There's no like, I don't have to do anything, so I'm not going to do anything. And I have all the time in the world to do it, so I'm just going to start it later. And then later becomes even later.
Or never.
Or never. Yeah, totally. But for me, actually, the most important thing outside of having more time in a day, and this is outside a weekend, that is just having flexibility.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I think and there's been a lot of conversations around this and things such as 4-day work weeks.
Yeah, 4-day work weeks, or just flexibility in how you, even in corporate environments, of how you want to spend your day. And it's something that I, for example, have always been interested in. I have never liked the fact that my workday is measured by the time that I spend in front of a computer instead of the results that I bring in.
Right, because we've talked about this a lot, but it's like when you work for whatever, a traditional work day, traditional companies even, and they say you have to work 9 to 5 because everyone else is working 9 to 5, you almost feel like you're chained to your desk to complete the 9 to 5 rather than completing your tasks. Because for me, I haven't actually had a traditional 9 to 5 type job in a very, very long time, like over 10 years. And so I oftentimes have been able to do the same amount of work in 6 hours.
And you sometimes say that to me, like if, let's say, if I have a bit of an easier work day, or if I have a little bit of a break in between and it's closer to the end of my workday and I walk around the house doing, like, I don't know, cleaning up or whatever, then you're like, sit down, get your work done so we can move on to something else. And I often have to say to you, it's like, yeah, I'm almost done, but I do have to stay online or sit here until X hour because only then have I fulfilled my 8 hours.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, like we talked about this earlier, but like some people have like shift work, so they'll work 12-hour days, but then it's only 12-hour days for 6 days, but then they get 4 days off in a row to make that up. And like the shift work is a different thing that I'm talking about, but I like a lot of people who have just a 4-day work week and they have the weekends to themselves. It allows them just to pursue other things that make them really happy, and for mental health purposes, I think that's really helpful. But anyone who has a flexible schedule is really great, because if I wake up early and I have lots of stuff that I have to complete early that is due, I just start right at 7, work until, let's say, 5, for example. But if I have a day where I don't need to do that, I can start my day at 10, and I know that this certain amount of stuff has to be done, and that's it. I work till 3, and if I'm done at 3, I'm done. I mean, that is so amazing. You've experienced that a little bit with me toward the tail end of living in Calgary, where you were flexible with what you were able to do.
Oh, it was my absolute favorite time ever. Like it's, and again, it didn't necessarily mean that I had, maybe there were days where I had 5 hours to myself, but then there were other days where I only had 1 hour to myself. So probably the overall time I had to myself was the same amount of time as now, but it was flexible and I was in control.
Yeah, like some days you'd wake up super early, do a bit of work. Then we would take, like, the worst part is, let's say in the winter, you wake up and the day is beautiful and you're stuck 8 hours. And then when you're done your work day, it's now dark, cold, and gross. So a lot of the times you wake up in the morning and it's the sun's coming up. You do like you sit down, focus 7 until 11 or noon, 3-4 hours worth of hard work, and then you go for your lunch and you take 2-3 hours off, and then you come back at the end of that and you work another hour or two to complete your task, and then you're done your day. Or in my case, a lot of the times it was so nice in the summer, I would just take the whole day off and then the next day I would just pound it out. However, that requires a lot of discipline.
Definitely. And I think especially like I work in a client facing role, so I really have to be available when the clients are available. I think there's also corporate environments where you can be a little more flexible and take that 3-hour lunch break and then work later into the evening. But really, like, yeah, it's a sense of I can't even describe it, this flexibility.
Because what happens is, I think what you're trying to say is that when you are forced to work 8 hours and forced to work those 8 hours in an exact time frame, it's like you're being encased in a box. It's like work jail, right? Like you have to be here from 9 to 5. Whereas, let's say these are the tasks given to you, and you complete them in 6 hours, and let's say you do 3 hours in the morning, take a 2-hour lunch break, 3 hours in the afternoon, or do all 6 hours in the morning and take the whole afternoon off. You are then still just being graded on the quality of your work and how good you are at it. Like I saw this thing that was really cool where a guy said, "Okay, do you want to pay me $20,000 to do this task for you, but I can get it done in 4 hours? Would you pay me?" The guy's like, and I think the example was, he's like, it's so that means I'm paying you $5,000 per hour.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, I would never do that. He's like, okay, well then, how about I tell you that I can only complete that task after 20 hours or 40 hours or whatever, and it's still 20,000. But I'm only still gonna do it within 4 hours. But I'll tell you, you know what I mean? So then you say, now you value how long I take to do something.
Isn't that messed up? It's
and that's the thing. He's like, well then, if I told you I could do it in 20 hours for $20,000, he's like, yeah, I would find someone who could do it faster and pay them less. And he's like, but then it would be a shittier job because you pick me because I do the best job, because I'm so good at my job, I've been efficient enough to do it in 4 hours. So he was just using an example of like, it's not always about time, it's about the quality. And sometimes someone who does such a good job, it's because they've put in so much time elsewhere to get good at that job. So now they're just more efficient at it.
And what you just said doesn't only apply to the work environment. You said it isn't about the time, it's about the quality, which also applies to what we talked about in terms of how you spend your free time. So really, I think we as humans are really focused on the concept of time in a lot of ways, but we should actually more look at the quality of how that time can be spent in a personal or a work environment. And I think like it is so messed up to me that if this guy had quoted saying, this is going to take me 40 hours and it's going to cost you $20,000, that 40 hours makes it sound like it's worth it.
Yep.
But then when you say 4 hours, right away the alarm goes on, being like, huh, that can't be, like, why
is it so expensive?
Why is it so expensive? And it's the same product, the same end result, and that's what it should.
Exactly, from the same person. And I think that's the one thing. I think time is measurable because there's only 24 hours in a day, so people can logically sort of measure that. Whereas quality can be measured, but it's harder.
For sure.
When you look at something, as an example, you look at one of the better IKEA products, a dining table, for example, and you look at a similar table that is made out of real hardwood and the craftsmanship is evidently better to a lot of people, and then say the IKEA table is 200 and the other dining table is 2,000. For people, it's hard to justify the qualitative difference. Being like, why is that one 10 times better, 100 times better, whatever that is, right? 200, 2,000, 10 times better. It's hard for them to like.
And I think quality not necessarily, it is subjective in a way too.
Yeah.
Like something that I find valuable, you might not find valuable.
Yeah.
And I think
but that's what I know, but that's what I'm saying. The point is that the IKEA table being made could take 5 hours to make it, and the other table could also take 5 hours to make it. But why is one 2,000, one 200? The quality is just very hard to decipher for a good amount of people. I don't want to speak for everybody, but the amount of time being measured
absolutely
can fully be measured, like, so. But I think it's an interesting topic.
Is it an interesting topic?
So interesting. I'm actually curious what the audience thinks about the topic, and if you're listening, it's going to be hard for us to get that feedback. But if you're watching, I would love to know what you think about that. Do you think you have more than 3 hours in a day to yourself? Do you think you have less because you have kids and all that?
And do you think there's such thing as too much time in a day? Because when I first read this research, I was like, that's not true. But then when I thought about it, I was convinced. But I'd be curious to know what other people think.
Yeah, when you first said it right away, I was like, no, you can have a lot of free time, because I always think about the weekends. Like, is the weekend long enough? Never.
Yeah.
Right? But I think when you start to have too many days of nothingness, you lose purpose, and that just creates being lethargic, being lazy, feeling depressed because you don't feel like you have a sense of accomplishment. And humans, I feel, we just need that. We feel the need to have a sense of completion, whatever that is. But I think with that said, we should wrap up and complete today's podcast.
Yeah, I think there's nothing else that
we can go deeper into. That was a lot of fun, though.
Yeah, totally.
I liked your story. I'd heard that story before, but I didn't realize you kind of just woke up and put on clothes and went to work. You didn't even brush your teeth or anything.
Yeah, I think that was actually the worst part of the whole thing. Like, because a shower can rejuvenate you, and you also, like, retail, especially in clothing, is often a really, like,
close proximity. Yeah,
you're very close to the people.
Actually, that's true. In my story, where I went to the rave and then went to work, I actually had the opportunity to have a shower. Like, I woke up and like had a shower. I think I had a quick shower, and I changed my clothes. And so, but still, can you imagine me just like every 10 minutes going back, like napping for 10 minutes, and while no one was there? It was so thankful that that area was so dead on a Sunday. No one really wanted to come up. But thank you for listening to the podcast on all the different platforms, on Spotify, Apple, Amazon, all the different places. Please rate it 5 stars if you're listening. That would be super helpful for us.
Definitely. And if you happen to watch on YouTube, we're always excited if you leave a comment of things that you enjoyed about the episode, your thoughts on this, or even suggestions for other topics if there's something that comes up.
Yes, definitely. Leave us some suggestions on Instagram even, or if that's easier, or YouTube, because we would love to dive into that a bit further. Kat's obviously can do some research if you're curious about anything. And if you're ever on our TikTok or Instagram Reels, then just, maybe a little wave emoji to let us know that you've been by. And we appreciate you listening, watching, all that good stuff.
And we will talk to you soon.
See you in the next one.
Bye.
Ciao.